Out on those back roads, the Amish world looks soft. Fresh fields, black buggies, no neon lights, no trap houses in sight. But if you stay in the lane long enough, the vibe flips. Some barns are more than barns. Some plain men move like bosses. Quiet kids sneak off into the dark chasing bottles, lines, and late night sins. Beards that should mean peace turn into targets. Horses become getaway rides. And in the middle of it, a small closed-off people start showing the same patterns you see in every hard gang story. Secrets, silence, money, power, and bodies left behind. This is the hidden file on Amish country. Join us as we tap into the underworld growing in the shadows of the buggy lane. The old order Amish move like a quiet set with deep roots. They come out of Swiss and Alsatian lines. They formed as traditionalist Anabaptist fellowships. Over time, scholars started calling them an ethno-religious group because they carry faith and culture together. They sit close to old order Mennonites and conservative Mennonites, all in that Anabaptist lane. Their rep is simple clothes, low-key living, Christian pacifism, and keeping tech at arm's length so family time and face-to-face talk do not get edged out. The values sound humble. Rural life, hard work, Gelassenheit, that is full submission to God's will. That is the base code. All that is in place before any street-level drama even shows up. There is no single Amish boss calling shots for everyone. No one kingpin over the whole map. Each community runs its own Ordnung. That is the house rules. Those rules can shift from district to district like different sets on different blocks. Dress, tech, church duties, how to deal with outsiders. It is all written inside the Ordnung. Baptized members decide it together before communion twice a year. The whole congregation talks it out in the Ordnungsgemeinde. Women vote in those meetings too. That matters when you're trying to keep a community tight. What flies in one district can get you checked hard in another, so the code stays local. The people own it. The core unit is the household. The mission is clear. Bear children, raise them, stay stitched to neighbors and kin. Big families are seen as blessings. On farms, the crew runs larger because sons keep the labor moving and the work flowing. Community sits at the center, not the edge. That is why the whole rhythm, chores, worship, barn, table, feels like one long loop. It is built to keep people close and dependent on each other instead of the outside world. The public sees the horse and buggy and thinks it is just a throwback. To the Amish, it is a speed limiter by design. Horse-drawn wheels keep life slow and human on purpose. Plenty of districts allow riding in cars, buses, or trains, but the line is drawn to protect the pace. These days, some folks roll electric bicycles. They are faster than walking or hitching up, but they still fit inside certain districts' rules. Transport is never just about getting from A to B. It is about guarding the cadence of life the Ordnung is built to protect. Modern life keeps pushing in. Taxes, schooling, and how laws get enforced all bring heat. Sometimes the hate is literal. People have thrown stones and junk at buggies from the road. The modern world has sprinted off in another direction, and the gap has grown wide. That split makes friction show. Legal fights here, hostility there. It chips at the clean separation the Ordnung tries to hold. When the border gets noisy, the inside code gets tested. Amish kids typically stop at 8th grade. The belief is that basic knowledge covers what you need to live the Amish way. Many districts run one-room schools with teachers from inside the community. Often they are young and unmarried. There is no high school and no college for almost all of them. The goal is not to build a pipeline to the outside. It is to feed skills and values that match the Ordnung and keep the family economy intact. There is a window that acts like a timeout. Teens get to taste the outside more. They hit hoedowns. They link up in youth groups. They test taboos like drinking, smoking, even driving cars. A longtime Strasbourg chief put it bluntly, times are a-changing. He said the young want to sow their wild oats and chase the bigger and better high. That is the open door where the world reaches back in. The line between a strict church code and fast temptations starts to blur. The stage is set for something louder than a barn dance. Then the collision hits headlines. Two young men from Gap, both named Abner Stoltzfus, ages 24 and 23, not related, get federally indicted in Philly. Prosecutors say they bought cocaine and meth from Pagan's motorcycle gang members. They say the two Abners moved that product to Amish youth gangs across Lancaster County. One lawman framed it perfectly. Bikes and buggies? It's a rather strange combination. The indictment ties the traffic to dances and youth crews, the Crickets, the Antiques, and the Pilgrims. It covers a 5-year stretch from 1993 to 1997. If convicted, the time could be life. Arraignment lands July 3rd. Even veteran agents admit they had never seen Amish defendants on drug charges before. In federal court, the culture clash looks sharp. Abner King Stoltzfus shows up in black pants with suspenders like an elder, but he is wearing a bright blue shirt and clean white sneakers. His hair is cut short with sharp sideburns, not the usual long, plain look people expect. 7 relatives and friends sit in the gallery. They are in typical Amish wear. They sit quiet and hide their faces from artists. Having your likeness drawn is seen as vanity. For generations, their families farmed, built, and ran small businesses. The towns carry names the outside world knows: Gap, Intercourse, Paradise, many homes with no electricity, and horse-drawn rides. That image is America's poster for hard work and faith. Now it is sharing space with federal drug counts. Inside the settlement, one voice speaks with honesty. Rebecca says, "So many people have an idealistic view of the Amish and treat us as if we are wonderful people. We aren't perfect." The prosecutor echoes that same kind of balance. He says the Amish still have a well-deserved reputation as hard-working, decent people. He says one indictment does not erase that. A defense lawyer for a pagan flips the angle. The public wants a story of pure boys corrupted by bikers. But the truth be known, she says, these kids are the same as any other kids who surrender to the temptations of youth. The lines between image and action get muddy fast. Suburban build-out from Philadelphia rolls into Lancaster. It does 2 things at the same time. It brings jobs, especially with fewer Amish staying on the old farms, but it also brings the city speed and offers. A Penn State sociologist says the perfect country myth never held. He says the Amish are very normal people. He warns the lifestyle is in danger as isolation gets harder to keep. When your day job is cabinet making for outside clients or working on construction crews, you see more of the outside grind. The boss might park a shiny pickup with a cell phone on the seat. Temptation sits right there on the passenger side. The road back to the Ordnung gets longer. A local magistrate named Isaac Stoltzfus lays it out straight. He was raised near the culture, even though his parents left. He says the drug wave is big everywhere. He says the Amish are not immune. He has not seen a spike in Amish crime overall, except underage drinking. But he does see more willingness now to press charges when they are wronged. He breaks down the myth around tech too. Some families keep phones, just not inside the house, maybe out in a shed. A gas grill by a farmhouse is not shocking to him. He tells an old story about a boy named Gideon Miller. Gideon loved the planes overhead. He became an airline pilot. He died on TWA Flight 800. Curiosity can carry far beyond the buggy lane. Not every path comes home. Another Stoltzfus, Abram, admits he drank during his time out. He then came back and quit for good. Prosecutors and agents draw the map around the pagans and the 2 Abners with numbers that turn heads. Multiple kilos. Meth and coke measured near $1 million in value. Youth dances tied directly to sales. At the press conference, they pitch it as a straight-up culture clash. The reckless biker world smashing into a serene, disciplined community. The assistant United States attorney says this is the first time they have brought Amish drug cases that he knows of. That shows how unusual the file is. Yet the defense for one Abner says the real story is simpler. The temptations are there, and even Horse and Buggy, the whole bit parents, are struggling to understand how fast that window can pull a teen into the wrong loop. On the same day people read the charges, some neighbors shake their heads and repeat the old image. Plain living, hard work, God first. Others accept what the papers show. The timeout creates openings, and suburban pressure makes isolation harder. The indictment says 8 pagans sold to the 2 Abners. The 2 young men then moved product to youth groups at dances across Lancaster County. That is the full picture the feds want the jury to see. The quote that keeps echoing is that mashup nobody expected: bikes and buggies. It lands because it feels like a symbol of how 2 worlds connected when a door was left open. Their attitude toward criminal justice sits on a whole different code. Cray Bill says, the Amish are taught to bear abuse and suffer insult rather than to fight injustice through legal means. That mindset comes from a long history of persecution, drilled into them through stories and books like Martyr's Mirror. They see themselves as a people who have always taken hits from the outside world. So calling the cops feels like breaking their own rule of staying separate from that system. They also believe the justice system is built by man, and the real shot caller is God. Running to the state over every disrespect does not fit their program at all. Because of that code, a lot of what happens to them never hits official stats. There have been hate crimes in places like Wisconsin, barn burnings in Pennsylvania, and the famous West Nickel Mine school shooting. But those are just the big cases that broke through. Lower level stuff like harassment, threats, and vandalism is likely way more common. The problem is, they rarely report it. They do not want to tangle with the government, so the dark figure of crime around them stays huge. Hostetler put it bluntly, no one will ever know how many crimes are smothered in silence. From a gang world angle, you are looking at a community taking hits without snitching, without paperwork, and without much outside protection. There is some offending inside Old Order Amish life. It is mostly rare and often tied to youth before they join the church. During Rumspringa, that running around phase starting at 16, Amish teens are allowed to taste the outside world. They join gangs of other Amish youth. But here gang just means a social group that rolls together. Most of what they do is mild, wearing non-Amish clothes, getting driver's licenses, buying cars or trucks, working for outsiders. But sometimes they push way past that line. One extreme example described a party in northern Indiana. Beer was flowing, rum and vodka were out. Some youth were passing joints, crank pipes, and lines of cocaine. A few were seriously addicted, others were trying drugs for the first time. Scenes like that are not the norm, but they show how far some Amish youth can drift once that sheltered life cracks open. Homes in Wayne counties in Ohio used to look like the softest place on the map. Rolling fields, bird watchers, buggies in the slow lane. Almost no serious crime in the police blotter, but that image cracked when meth started creeping in from nearby Summit County. That was the county already blowing up with labs back in 2004 when cops broke up 126 cooks in 1 year. For a long time, people liked to believe hard drugs were a city problem, something for Akron corners and biker crews, not quilt towns and family farms. Then the numbers started shifting, bust by bust. Suddenly, the same chemical curse that wrecked city blocks in the crack era was setting up shop out in the corn. It got so real that more than 150 Amish men and women packed into a barn near Millersburg to hear law enforcement break down the new threat. You had horses tied up outside. Inside, officers were talking labs, raids, and toxic fumes. Paul Miller, who runs the Amish and Mennonite Heritage Center, said straight, "It's a jolt to the stereotype of the quaint, rural community that we have in Amish country. It's a jolt to our own values. We don't condone it. We don't want to see it happen." Even though no one busted in the area had been Amish, he could see from the police blotter that the game had changed. At the same time, Amish church leaders sat with cops because they knew this was not just city poison drifting by. It was now sitting in their own backyard. On the law side, the Medway Drug Enforcement Agency started seeing the spike play out in real time. In 2007, they hit just one lab in the Wayne Holmes Medina region. By the next year in the reports, that number had jumped to 17. The region sits less than a half hour from the meth epicenter in Summit County. So once the product started moving, it did not stop at the county line. Prosecutor Steve Noling said, "I've seen more meth in the last year than in the past 20 years. Probation officers were seeing meth show up alongside weed as one of the most common dirty tests. Holmes County only has around 42,000 people, and there had been 8 labs seized in 12 months. Those numbers would be 2 weeks' work in Summit. Out here, they felt like a full-blown invasion on a quiet set. Making meth in Millersburg and Worcester plays out very different from cooking in Akron. Out in Amish country, houses are spaced out and sheds sit back off the road. There is plenty of empty land. That means no neighbors smelling the noxious vapor or calling 911 when a cook goes bad. The chemical smoke that would give a trap house away on a city block just drifts off over fields here. Anhydrous ammonia, the same fertilizer used on corn, is easy to find on farms. When that gets mixed with cold tablets and other components, you have the base for the product. Cooks figured out quicker one-pot or shake-and-bake methods. They could throw everything into a bottle, whip it up along a back road, then toss the toxic trash into a ditch or cornfield and drive off with a fresh batch. One 19-year-old user said the crews formed cliques, traded methods, and multiplied fast. You have 1, then 5, then 10. Pretty soon, you have a lot of people making it. The paper trail in Holmes County makes it clear this is not just rumors. Deputies hit a rural house and called it yet another methamphetamine lab. They took down Daniel Weaver and seized gear, including farm fertilizer used in the cook. He had already been on probation in Wayne County for meth charges. In another case, cops pulled trash from a Millersburg home after a tip and found chemical residue and cold tablets in the bags. Inside lived Lisa Wilson and her boyfriend, Delane Goodwin, while a 14-year-old girl tied to that house had already tested positive for meth. Wilson caught 4 years. Goodwin got 8. The court labeled it meth plus child endangering. Then there was Troy Lastokine's spot north of Millersburg, a lab set up less than 1,000 feet from Holmesville Elementary School. 2 kids were in the home when officers rolled up. Lastokine walked away with an 8-year sentence, while the school superintendent said, "We're a family-oriented community. It shows that these things can crop up anywhere." While the local numbers climbed, law enforcement in other areas were also making heavy hits tied back to people from the same wider region. 2 men from Millersburg, Gary Stutzman and Dean Troyer, were indicted in federal court in Pennsylvania for allegedly moving more than 100 grams of meth to undercover officers. That shipment was pegged at around $11,000. In another checkpoint story coming out of the talk, Agents found 75 pounds of meth hidden in furniture, a haul big enough to feed whole networks. On the streets, this is the kind of thing that feeds the legend. People start throwing around lines about Amish drillers and trappers who run trap houses, can source anything, and catch bodies, while still rolling in horse and buggy territory. At the same time, the official reports keep saying the ones busted so far are not Amish themselves. Inside all that noise, Amish voices like Ed Miller's are trying to hold the line. An Amish contractor out of Apple Creek, he sat with law enforcement and told reporters, "The devil doesn't care where we live, whether in the city or in the country. He seeks out the weakest. There's a big concern about methamphetamine. We don't want that." He keeps asking cops to keep pulling up to Amish homes and explaining the danger of this chemical demon. He knows the same open land that makes it easy to hide a bottle cook also makes it easy for the poison to slide into their circles. "We all have souls, and we're all going through this together," he said. "We believe that if we can help one person, it will be worth it." While elders try to harden the block spiritually, some of the younger ones are already testing the edges. That crack in the image showed up clearly in one wild little case out of Cattaraugus County, New York in 2010. Deputies watched an Amish teen, Levi Detweiler, blow through a stop sign in a horse and buggy. When they lit him up, he did not pull over. Instead, he tried to do the dash and made them eat dust in a slow motion chase that ran on for miles. The horse was basically playing getaway car. It all ended when Levi tried to swing too sharp into a driveway. The buggy flipped into a ditch. He then tried to finish the escape on foot. After a week of hunting, officers finally picked him up. They charged him with underage alcohol possession, overdriving an animal, reckless endangerment, and failing to stop for police. His bond was set at $500. 2 Amish men helped free the horse and pull the busted buggy out of the ditch. It was a small case on paper, but it showed one more thing. Even in a community built on quiet, some kids are starting to act like they want to run their own little outlaw track, and the line between simple mischief and full-blown trap life is getting thinner. In Ohio, this whole thing kicked off like a twisted gang feud, just without guns. In 2011, a small Amish community in Bergholz started sliding on other Amish they had problems with. Crews were pulling up to rival homes, holding people down, and chopping off beards and hair by force. These were not playful trims. Victims were grabbed and pinned. Their look was getting destroyed while they were scared for real. Police called it what it was: assault and battery. The first 4 suspects from Bergholz got arrested and hit with bonds of $250,000 each. Authorities were already saying they expected more bodies from that crew to get picked up. To understand how dirty this move was, you need to know what a beard means in Amish world. Men keep their beards as a symbol of their identity, and women do not cut their hair at all, for religious reasons. Touching that is like stripping someone's rank in front of everybody. One lawyer broke it down with a simple example. If someone smacks the hat off your head with a club, that is still battery, even if they never hit your skin. Hair is closely connected to you, and in this culture it is even deeper. Cutting another man's beard is like saying he is less than a man. One writer even asked, "How would you like your identity to be severed away from you?" For these victims, it was not just a bad haircut. It was pure humiliation with a religious twist. Behind the scenes, investigators said there was one main shot caller on this weird little Amish war, a bishop named Samuel Mullet Sr., 66 years old. He was accused of calling the plays after other bishops pushed back on his power. That began when they denied his decision to excommunicate 8 families who did not like his style of leadership. Prosecutors said the cuts were revenge moves. Mullet and 11 other Amish men hit federal court on conspiracy, assault, and evidence tampering charges. All pled not guilty. A judge refused to let him out on bond at first, saying electronic monitoring at his house would not work because he had no electricity and might run. Mullet later tried to play it smart and offered to let them bring power and electronics into his home so he could wear an ankle monitor. Prosecutors still said he was too dangerous. They claimed he had threatened enemies, even some of his own kids, and was plotting more beard attacks. What made this whole thing look even more like a twisted gang case was the way the feds grabbed it. 16 Amish men ended up in a federal courtroom, charged with hate crimes for the beard cutting hits. Usually hate crimes are one group targeting another. Here it was Amish on Amish. Prosecutors argued it still counted because the motive was religious beef. Victims were targeted for challenging Mullet's religious authority. To make it federal, they had to tie it to interstate commerce. So they locked onto one detail: the scissors. Those blades had been made in New York and brought into Ohio. That was enough to open the federal hate crime lane. Jury selection went deep. Lawyers pressed potential jurors hard. They asked if anyone had already heard about the case. They asked if anyone had a problem with the government bringing it. They asked if anyone knew any of the people involved. Any bias could twist the verdict. so they tried to filter all that out. When the trial finally wrapped, the hammer came down heavy. Samuel Mullet got convicted on 7 of the 9 counts he faced. All 15 of his followers caught at least one conviction too. Federal officials wanted to make an example out of this crew. One prosecutor said their violent and offensive actions targeted symbols held sacred by this country's Amish citizens and were an insult to religious freedom. They wanted to send a clear message about religious intolerance. With federal hate crimes on the table, everyone in that squad was staring at big numbers. Minimums were stacked at 210 months. That is more than 17 years on the clock. All that time for what some outsiders still tried to clown as just beard cutting. By April 2013, it was time for sentencing. 16 people were hit for hate crimes tied to 5 different attacks that went down between September and November 2011. The FBI walked the court through how it all happened. They showed how Mullet, as bishop in Bergholz, ordered his followers to roll up on other Amish men and women, some of them elderly. Crews pulled into homes and used scissors and horse shears to chop off long beards and hair that had been growing for decades. FBI agent Michael Soroman said, Sam Mullet didn't like to be crossed. He laid out how Mullet twisted his people's minds. He convinced them they were helping the victims by bringing them closer to God. At first, victims were scared to talk. They finally stepped up because they did not want it to happen to other people. Some even had to testify against their own children. The FBI called those victims very brave and said once the feds stepped in, we weren't going to let them down. But this was just the first chapter. Amish country's quiet image was about to collide with the appeals courts and a long, messy sequel. After those heavy sentences dropped on the Bergholz squad, the case did not disappear. It spun back up in the higher courts like part 2 of a gang war. In 2014, the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals took another look at the beard-cutting case. The judges said the hate crime convictions could not stand because of how the jury had been taught to read the law. They pointed to considerable evidence that these hits came out of messy, interpersonal and intra-family disagreements, not strictly because of the victim's religious beliefs. That mattered because the hate crime statute needs that religious motive locked in. So the hate crime pieces got reversed. That move alone chopped a lot of years off the max time everybody was facing. What had been treated like a pure religious war in the first trial was now recast as a twisted family beef that went way too far. Once those hate crime counts fell, the whole lineup had to go back in front of the judge for new numbers. Samuel Mullet's sentence was cut down to 10 years and 9 months. The ones with 7-year bids had their time dropped to 5. The ones with 5 got cut to 3 years and 7 months. Some of the lower level players had already finished their original time by then, so the new math did nothing for them in real life. Even with the reductions, nobody walked away clean. The system basically said, you are not doing hate crime time anymore, but you are still doing time for the way you ran this play and for how you tried to hide it. The Bergholz defendants were not happy with that reset. They tried to push it further and went back to the appeals court again. This time, they claimed the new sentences were still too harsh and based on the wrong standards. They said giving max level time on charges like unlawful restraint was substantially unreasonable. Judge Jeffrey Sutton did not blink. When the beard cutter's lawyer argued that the restraint sentence should not apply, Sutton shot back, if unlawful restraint applies here, it applies. What am I missing? The crew tried to say the rules got bent on them. The judges were not buying that narrative. The squad had already gotten time shaved off after the hate crime reversal. The court was in no mood to cut any deeper into their bid. One strange issue came up during that round. Some judges asked why the beard cutters were not retried on the hate crime counts after those convictions got reversed. There was a question whether skipping a new trial really gave the full picture. The government answered that dragging these Amish defendants back and forth to court by horse and buggy would be too heavy a burden, so they chose not to retry the hate crime charges. The defense tried to flip that into an angle, saying they just wanted a fair and complete trial. Judge Sutton sounded almost stunned. He asked, "Your client wants to be retried for the hate crime. Some people just can't accept victory." That line showed how wild the situation had become. The defense had already caught a win on the hate crime piece. Pushing too hard risked putting those heavier charges right back on the table. The appeals opinion also laid out the backstory like a street history, showing how this drama started years before the first beard hit the floor. Around 2001, the Bergholz group became its own church district inside the Old Order Amish. As bishop, Samuel Mullet held serious power. He had the authority to shun or excommunicate people he thought stepped out of line. In 2006, he used that authority on several members who questioned his leadership. In Amish culture, if someone is shunned in one district, other communities usually will not take them until that first group forgives them. But this time, other bishops stepped in. They reversed Mullet's excommunications and said those people could join their churches anyway. That move split the whole scene into two camps. Some still rode with Bergholz, others turned away. The divide ripped into families, marriages, and even child custody fights. Out of that messy family drama, the beard-cutting idea first showed up. At the start, it was turned inward, not outward. Some people in Bergholz cut their own beards as a way to show they were taking blame for sins they believed had cost them their grandchildren. But that ritual did not stay harmless for long. Once the anger toward outsiders and critics grew, the same act got flipped into a weapon. They started turning that blade on other Amish, parents, friends, ex-members, anyone who had criticized Bergholz's practices or walked away from Mullet's control. Hired cars were brought in to move between communities so they could pull up on targets in other districts. In each hit, several assailants grabbed a man by his beard, forced him into a chair, and held him while scissors, an electric trimmer, or horse shears took the beard off. In one run, they chopped a woman's long hair. On a couple of missions, they even used a disposable camera to snap pictures, like trophies from the job. Local authorities were the first to respond, but the case quickly got big enough that a federal grand jury stepped in. 16 people from Bergholz were indicted on 3 different lanes. First, violating the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. Second, concealing evidence, which included hiding that disposable camera with pictures from an attack. Third, lying to the FBI, a count aimed at Samuel Mullet himself. All 16 were also hit with a conspiracy charge. That count said they agreed to commit the hate crimes, hide the evidence, and lie to the feds. The jury sat through 10 days of testimony and convicted them on most of it. They found conspiracy to commit the hate crimes and to conceal evidence. They returned guilty on 5 out of 6 hate crime counts. They were convicted on the obstruction count tied to the camera. They also hit the false statement count. The first appeal later knocked out the hate crime part because of the jury instructions, but the conspiracy to hide evidence and the obstruction count stayed locked in. In the second appeal, the defense tried a fresh angle. They went after the remaining convictions and raised arguments they could have brought the first time, but did not. The Sixth Circuit shut that down fast. The court said it is well settled that you cannot sit on challenges in round 1 and then unload them in a later appeal just because it fits your plan. The lawyers then tried to play with the word jurisdiction. They claimed Congress did not have the power to pass the hate crime law. So, they argued, the FBI had no jurisdiction to investigate, and if the FBI had no jurisdiction, the court had no jurisdiction to hear any part of the case. The judges called out that word game. They pointed out that jurisdiction means different things for Congress, the FBI, and the courts. In this situation, the district court clearly had the power to hear federal criminal cases. Since the defendants had not raised these claims earlier, the court treated them as forfeited. At that stage, the most the crew could hope for was plain error review, and the court said their arguments did not come close to clearing that bar. Another shot the defense took was at how the sentencing guidelines treated their actions as kidnapping or unlawful restraint. That label bumped their guideline levels and added time. The jury had been instructed that for this case, kidnapping meant restraining and confining a person by force, intimidation, or deception with intent to terrorize or cause bodily injury, or restraining someone in a way that created a serious risk of harm. That matches how a lot of states, including Ohio, define kidnapping. The appeals court said that anything fitting that definition also falls under the federal guideline that covers kidnapping, abduction, unlawful restraint. In that guideline, unlawful restraint is broad. It covers any physical or forcible restraint of a victim. Once you are grabbing a man by his beard, forcing him into a chair, and holding him while you cut off his beard or hair, you're in that zone. The court also made it clear that even though the hate crime convictions were reversed, the judge could still use the underlying conduct at sentencing. That was allowed as long as it was proven by a preponderance of the evidence, which is a lower standard than beyond a reasonable doubt. The district judge had also added time for vulnerable victims and hit Mullet with a leadership enhancement, and both moves went under the microscope. Some of the people attacked were elderly or in bad health. Because the attackers were family members and close community members, they knew exactly who they were targeting. The guidelines let a court raise the sentence when a defendant knew or should have known a victim was unusually vulnerable because of age or physical condition. The appeals court said that enhancement fit what happened. For Mullet, a 4-level leadership bump got added because he clearly ran both the community and the conspiracy. Witnesses described how much control he held in Bergholz. After the attacks, people gathered at his house. He gave instructions on what to do with the camera and other evidence. Even though the remaining convictions on paper were about concealing evidence and conspiracy to do that, the judge was allowed to look at the full pattern. From that angle, Mullet sat in the boss chair, so the leader enhancement stuck. At resentencing, the judge did not just throw random numbers at each name. He set up tiers for the defendants based on how deep each one was in the scheme. The judge wanted to keep the same rank order of who was most guilty and who was less, so he took the top tier and dropped Mullet's time down to the new statutory max on the remaining counts, then cut the others by the same percentage, about 28%. The defense later tried to say this percentage move was arbitrary. They had not objected when it happened. On appeal, the court said using proportions to keep sentences lined up between co-defendants is not wrong. The judge also looked at their lack of prior records, their families, and the emotional damage to the victims. The new sentences ended up lower overall than the originals. That undercut any claim that the court was being vindictive or punishing them for appealing, and it left the Bergholtz crew still locked into the time the system said they had earned. In November 2013, out in East Lampeter Township, Pennsylvania, an Amish buggy was just creeping down the road. 5 passengers inside, horse in front, moving slow like always in the buggy lane. Out of nowhere, a car slid past and somebody inside let a shot off. Straight drive-by energy on a country stretch. The people in the buggy heard the loud bang, but they did not jump to gunshot. Around there, clowns in cars sometimes throw firecrackers at buggies just to spook the horse and laugh it off. So they figured it was just more disrespect from the outside world and kept rolling, not knowing a real round had already connected. They did not clock what really went down until the buggy reached a nearby farm and they finally looked close at the horse. That is when they saw it, blood on the chest. The animal had been shot clean while still strapped in the harness, pulling them forward like nothing happened. They called a vet, hoping to save their only engine on that road, but the horse died before help could arrive. For the Amish, that is not just property. That is their ride, their work partner, their daily grind. Lieutenant Robin Weaver from East Lampeter Township Police said, "In my 30 years, I've never seen anything like this," which tells you how wild it is when someone does a drive-by on a buggy, like it is a street hit, turning a quiet farm lane into a shooting scene. That kind of move showed how even these slow lanes were starting to feel like somebody's test track, and a few months later, the same state saw the next level of buggy chaos hit the books. Back in Pennsylvania, the drama moved from classrooms to country roads. In Wilmington Township, it is usually quiet, fields, buggies, not much noise. Then troopers caught a case that sounded like a street hit and run, just flipped into Amish mode. In March 2014, a Honda CR-V was sitting at an intersection. A horse and buggy slammed into the driver's side. Instead of stopping, the buggy driver dipped out. He took off on horseback with the buggy still behind him. The suspect was reportedly Amish. He left the scene the way any reckless driver would. No check on the victim, no check on the horse, just gone into the dark. The person in the CR-V walked away with no injuries. The cops were still forced to stretch their search beyond Mercer County. They now had to figure out which quiet-looking buggy driver thought he could tag a car, run off, and leave the mess behind like nothing happened. That was not the only time Amish wheels turned reckless. In western New York, police rolled out on a call about a buggy party near a rural farm by Sherman. They probably expected some noise and a few kids sneaking drinks. What they found was a whole different vibe. Several young Amish men and women were out there getting lit. The buggies were loaded with enough booze to keep the function going all night. While officers were responding, one horse-drawn buggy became the problem. It was driven by a young Amish host named Marty Torrier. He changed lanes on the public road and collided with the cop car. Now the scene was not just a party. It was a crash, sirens and buggies trying to flee. 3 Amish men and 1 woman got hauled in for underage drinking. Torrier faced more heat. He was hosting the party and driving. Depending on his blood alcohol level, he could still be hit with DUI. Out there, it does not matter if you drive a truck or a buggy. The rules of the road cover anything you are steering. Then came 2020. COVID had the whole world on lockdown. Even in Ohio Amish country, the pressure did not stop the parties. In Huntsburg Township, deputies pulled up just after 1 a.m. A caller had told 911 there was a loud party in a barn behind a home. Sheriff Scott Hildenbrand went to check. He did not walk into a small family hang. He walked into a barn packed with over 100 Amish people. The spot was jumping, music, drinking, no distance, no masks. Some people ran when the cops came in. Some stayed put. One 18-year-old was so gone they could not wake him. They had to call an ambulance. 2 people were charged with underage drinking. 1 man got locked up for disorderly conduct after getting loud with officers. The host caught a charge for failing to comply with Governor Mike DeWine's stay-at-home order. The sheriff said, their standard answer right now was to say they thought the rules only applied to older people. So while the rest of the state was stuck inside, these kids were treating the barn like a secret club and the shutdown like just another excuse to throw an outlaw-style function. That Bundysburg Road barn bash was not the only scene on the radar. The deputies had already been breaking up other Amish gatherings that ignored the rules. On April 8th, they shut down a basketball game inside a barn on Georgia Road. Over 30 people were there playing or watching. The group listened and left when told to stop, but it showed how barns had turned into underground gyms. 3 days before the big drunk fest, law enforcement busted another party. That one was on Nauvoo Road in Middlefield Township with more than 75 Amish people. The homeowner told deputies he thought the stay-at-home order was only for the elderly. In Mesopotamia, they had a wedding, which was allowed, then flipped it into a big reception, which got them charged. On March 29th, deputies were sent to 2 large Amish religious meetings on Tavern Road and on Georgia. They did not raid those. They warned them to keep safe distances and follow the health rules. The county health commissioner stepped in too. An Amish bishop asked him to send letters to the bishops, telling them not to hold church services, weddings, funerals, and other gatherings. At the same time, Amish school boards were calling him asking if they should shut their schools for the rest of the year. He said the Amish were actually ahead of the curve on that point. So in the same community, you had secret parties popping in one barn and cautious moves to close schools in another. 2 very different responses on the same block. In January 2016, the mask finally slipped on an Amish minister named Samuel Borntreger, age 39, sitting in Summershade, Kentucky. He walked into authorities in Barron County and laid it all out. He told them that back in late 2006, when he was living in rural Missouri, he killed his wife, Anna Yoder Borntreger. No gun, no knife. He said he put antifreeze in her drinks and even battery acid in her rectum. Anna was only 26 when she died. They had 4 kids together. The youngest was just 10 months old. At the time, doctors said she had a liver problem. Now investigators think that liver problem might have really been straight poison. Back then, Samuel was working as a cabinet maker on a farm in an Amish community northwest of Bethany, Missouri. People in Harrison County knew him as a solid worker, well known and liked. The kind of guy whose cabinetry sat in local homes, the prosecutor's office, even the courtroom itself. His parents ran an Amish store on the same property. On the surface, it looked like a straight, respectable setup. Behind the scenes, according to his own confession, he decided he didn't love her anymore and slowly took Anna out in the coldest way possible. After his confession, Anna's body was pulled from an Amish cemetery in Missouri so investigators could check her remains against her old medical records. The sheriff said some family members had thought, even back then, that it was not just a liver issue and that she should have gotten a second opinion. Samuel did not stick around long after her death. Within a year, he remarried and had 4 more children, then moved away from Missouri less than 2 years before the case broke open. Sheriff Josh Eckerson said he needed to get it off his conscience, and that is why he finally confessed. He even had written a letter to someone in Missouri saying he had committed a crime. Eckerson, who had seen plenty, still said it really took me by surprise, because to the community, Samuel looked like a decent craftsman and minister, not a man now sitting in jail with no bond, waiting to be shipped back to Missouri on a first-degree murder charge. And Borntreger was not the only Amish husband who turned on his own wife. A few years earlier in Ohio, another man from a plain community ran his own deadly play and ended up doing time on a murder case that shook the block. Eli Weaver is not out running around. He is sitting in an Ohio prison, working prison jobs like food service, trash crew, maintenance, porter, all that grind. Paperwork shows he has been moved around a few times, but he keeps a clean discipline record. On the outside, people are watching that parole date coming up. If he ever walks out, locals say he is not getting love. He would be shunned hard by the Amish community. His own parents have washed their hands of him. He even tried to sneak an ad into an Amish newsletter looking for female pen pals, still trying to play Amish stud from a cell. Back home around Apple Creek, his 5 kids had to grow up under that cloud. Neighbor Mary Eicher says the children seem to be doing well on the surface, but they are very private and feel ashamed of what he did. 2 of them went to see him in prison recently, where he now leads a work group. They are not out here giving interviews or clout. They do not want to talk about it with outsiders. Barbara's people stepped up and raised the kids, just like Eli had once planned, only now he is not the hero in that story. To see how it got this dark, you have to rewind to 2009. Eli and his wife Barbara were part of the strict Andy Weaver Amish, a group that is not supposed to touch computers, internet, or cell phones. Eli broke that line. He kept a secret phone and jumped into online chat rooms, calling himself Amish Stud. He left the Amish twice to live English, chasing women, then slid back when real life felt too hard. Barbara saw the switch in him. In letters to a counselor, she wrote, "Where did my friend, love, trustworthy husband go to? He hates me to the core." One of the women he locked in with was Barbara Barb Raber, a Mennonite taxi driver who hauled Amish riders. Eli ran game on her, having sex in her car and in his barn. She got him a laptop and a phone so he could talk to other women and still plot from inside the plain world. Investigators later found he had asked multiple people to kill his wife, and most brushed it off. Raber did not. She and Eli texted about how to get rid of Barbara. She ran around 840 internet searches on how to poison someone. They talked about poisoning a cupcake, a soda, slipping rat poison into her food. In the end, they chose a rifle, his rifle. On June 2nd, 2009, Barbara Weaver was found shot dead in her home. Eli had set up his alibi. Out fishing with friends at around 3:30 a.m., Raber, married with 3 kids of her own, had no clean alibi. She told cops she only meant to scare Barbara and the gun went off, then later claimed she did not remember being in the house. Her prints were not found inside and her lawyer tried to flip it, arguing Eli shot his wife before he went fishing. The jury did not ride with that. In September 2009, Raber was convicted of aggravated murder and got 23 years to life. She is locked in at the Ohio Reformatory for Women and will not even see parole board until June 2032. Eli took a plea, testified against her, and caught 15 years to life for complicity to commit murder, with parole eligibility in June 2024. An author, Rebecca Morris, said this case really shook the community. The motive was cold. Eli wanted both lives. If he left, he would have been shunned. If his wife was dead, as his lawyer put it, they pat him on the back. He figured as a widower, he could keep his business, send the kids to Barbara's sister, and stay embraced by the Amish while still running his side action. People who knew Barbara describe her like the model church wife. Ica calls her super nice, a gentle soul, and compares her to the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31. Eli, on the other hand, was holding money back, charming on the surface, cold underneath. Morris says the real mystery is not what he did. The only mystery is why he thought he could get away with this. Out here, the picture people like to post is simple: beards, bonnets, barns, horses in the slow lane. But once you peel it back, you have beard crews running revenge missions, youth sipping lean by lantern at barn parties, meth cooks turning corn country into quiet trap zones, husbands and ministers moving like cold operators, poisoning wives, lining up alibis, or calling in side chicks to pull the trigger. Even the ones who stay clean still gotta roll past drive-bys on buggies, drunk drivers on meth, and masked stick-up boys treating them like walking ATMs in the dark. So now you know, the plain world is not soft. It just plays its drama behind closed doors, under low light, and without Instagram. The question is what you do with that picture. When you see a buggy now, do you see a victim, a suspect, or both? When a community refuses to snitch, is that loyalty or a setup for more blood? And in a place built on peace, what happens when the next Amish gangster decides he wants to run the whole trap? Let us know what you think in the comments box below. And if you liked how we presented you this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.